I've been saying today that all the work that has been done during the COVID and post-COVID period, although we really got out of COVID, I guess, what everyone has been done under really difficult circumstances, and I'm just really proud of the students and how they prevailed in doing their work. So, and I'm really looking forward to your presentation. So Julia Thompson is a senior majoring in visual arts education, minoring in psychology. She is president of the Art Education Student Association and has curated multiple exhibitions here on campus featuring work from SUNY New Paltz students and students of her own. And this was not easy to do in these times, so it's really impressive. This is her last semester on campus. She will begin student teaching this January. Post-graduation, Julia hopes to secure a teaching position at the secondary level. She also plans to further her education in disability studies and disability activism in the hopes of creating more accessible learning environments for her students. She's going to be presenting her thesis in visual arts and Tourette's syndrome. Her work combines autoethnography and arts-based research to explore the application of art as an avenue of both self-care and community building within the context of her lived experience. And her thesis advisor, Professor Franklin Phipps, is here. And so we can
Good afternoon, everybody. So I'd like to start off with our first, there she goes. Okay, so I'd like to start off with talking a little bit about the reasoning behind why and how I took the approach to research that I did. My presentation is about Tourette's. I myself have Tourette's. I was diagnosed at about 11. And it's been something that I have been lacking in resources and navigating through my life, and finding art and then arts education and that field of mutual support and different ways of taking care of each other has been really instrumental in my own experience. And then I met two staff members, Dr. Auselia Franklin Phipps and Dr. Andrea Kantrowitz, who both have these approaches to researching that are just so authentic and so against this capitalist, very white, very Western idea of research being objective when there is no such thing as objective research, and allowing kind of my personal knowledge to be spoken from me rather than being someone else's case study has been really important to me. So the first thing I did was I did arts-based research, where I did what was my natural inclination to do of processing my thoughts, my memories, and the knowledge that I've accumulated through my own personal experiences through artwork. Some of it is better than others. It's really about what I was thinking about as I was creating it. And then those thoughts have kind of been organized into what's an autoethnographic approach to kind of sharing my story and how it contributes to broader conversations about how art can be used to not only mitigate physical discomfort and lessen the sensory input that overwhelms the brain and help it function in a way that's healthier, but also help us reach out to people who understand us better and can teach us how to take care of ourselves in ways that even professionals may not be able to. So I've created a very small piece called My Own Case Study with the phrase, "And how does that make me feel?" It's an empty chair, kind of symbolizing my very early on rejection of this hierarchical, scary doctor's office approach to taking care of myself and understanding myself. And I've written therapist out to lunch, kind of that play on words of out to lunch being crazy, or being in your own little world and kind of seeing the value in learning about myself rather than having someone else tell me about myself. And then now having the opportunity to tell my own story instead of being in someone else's report. So I would like to officially begin my work with my usual spiel about Tourette's, which you've already gotten a little bit of. Every time I disclose that I have Tourette's syndrome, I have the following conversation, verbatim. It felt appropriate to let it be the exposition of my work. I have Tourette's syndrome, a neurological disorder characterized by uncontrollable and repetitive thoughts, movements, or sounds. If my body language seems strange, I'm ticking or stimming, I'm probably only bringing this up to contextualize an argument I'm making about accessibility. Yes, I know you never would have noticed if I did not tell you. Thank you for assuming I'm neurotypical. I find this insulting and ableist. No, what you see on TV is not always accurate. Only about 10% of us have coprolalia. Coprolalia is the swearing thing. I don't have coprolalia. I swear a lot because my mom's from New Jersey. Usually I give a list of my physical tics, but it doesn't feel necessary. Usually I would give a funny example of my echolalia, but that's not appropriate for this environment. Echolalia is the thing where you repeat words or phrases. I will keep the scary ones and the dangerous ones to myself. Tourette's is not just tics. Cue the iceberg metaphor, with motor tics and vocal tics on top, and everything else that I experience underneath. No, I'm not going to grow out of it. No, juice cleanses and exercise did not cure it, but art helped. It's so neat that you repeat things or make strange noises or get muscle spasms sometimes. You're so right, we can all have a little bit of Tourette's as a treat. And no, I was not trying to overshare or be vulnerable with you, but I'm sorry and thank you anyways, I think. So this piece I wrote or created based on this conversation and called it From Under the Iceberg, because every time I have this conversation, I have to explain that, yes, my surface level tics are not noticeable to you because I hide them, but everything about the way that I work, the way that I think, the way that I take care of myself, the way that I move exists underneath the water, and it's difficult to be recognized and get the resources that would actually help me instead of putting me in a box that would not benefit me from underneath this iceberg of symptoms. Getting into the science and putting my psychology minor to good use. I, throughout my experience as an early teenager, have been kind of spewing these facts about neuroscience and about why my brain may work the way it does, that these explanations that I had never fully understood and probably don't still understand. I just figured out what a knockout mouse was like a month ago. But I did find this study that helped it make sense and gave me a little bit of faith that a newer generation of scientists is actually trying to figure out why I am the way I am in a way that's not dangerous and that won't put me on medication that was not designed for me. So this piece is called If Mice Could Make Art, and it's based on a study that was done where they used knockout mice where they have a regular genetic makeup, and then they swapped out the one gene that causes Tourette's, or at least causes the predisposition, and then they exposed these little mice to repetitive stressors and actually trained them or conditioned them and bred them to have Tourette's. Now they're using these mice to try and learn how to cure people with Tourette's. And something about this study made me really resonate with that little statue in Russia of a mouse who's knitting DNA. Thinking about how those mice might feel strangely made me recognize my own experiences with a little bit more compassion and appreciate the fact that the mice did not have to answer to adults or authority figures or deadlines or teachers or anyone in their life about why they're ticking or why they move that way or why it takes them so long to do certain things because they keep making repetitive movements. And so sorry, didn't sleep. It was just a really sweet way to goodness gracious, find some compassion for children with disabilities who don't know how to express themselves and who may not have access to things like art that can soothe them and help them advocate for themselves. So sort of inspired by the little paintings I made for the hypothetical mice, I started moving into thinking about how art has physically helped me mitigate the very physical not even getting into the emotional aspect, but the sensations in my body that I have to let out. Sometimes emotions become extremely overwhelming. I'm unfortunately someone who feels all of my feelings 100% when I do feel them, and that's just part of my neurotype. And sometimes stimming or crying is just a way for my brain to release a pressure gauge that builds up more quickly than other people's do. And stimming is one way that I take care of myself in private and kind of let my thoughts and feelings from the day out of my system. So I've just drawn a partial portrait of my upper body where I'm usually stimming with my hands, and then added these handprints that reminded me of the handprints of the little mice, because my hands are such kind of a metaphor for both my Tourette's in that they move so strangely, but they also are my tool for getting what I need. Then, moving into a more serious topic, this is a little bit of a content warning or a trigger warning, but I won't be too graphic about my description. People with my neurotype, people who experience Tourette's, and like I said, have overwhelming emotions that cannot be processed in a way that is typical or healthy, may resort to self-harm in multiple forms. And art has been a way for me to reclaim and redirect this need to make permanent marks. And as I've been working on this series, I realized I was painting with just shorts on, and I would dry my brush off to grab a new color of paint on my legs in a similar way that I would release stress in an unhealthy way as a child. And it seemed like a beautiful comparison and a beautiful example of how art is really a physical and emotional act that isn't always about rendering something, and can sometimes just to be about the physical motions of letting your body speak through the paint and having that release. Then moving on to the psychological symptoms, which are a little bit more fun and interesting to talk about. We have perseveration and consumption, something that not only people with Tourette's do, but also a lot of autistic people and people with similar neurotypes, people with ADHD famously, will develop these hyperfixations on something, just fall in love with something so deeply and in every facet of what it is. And it reminded me of this class that I had taken with Dr. Carol Vasquez, actually, about creativity and mental illness, and this concept of the mad genius, and kind of that being an artist who fully invests themselves in their work requires some level of some level of perseveration and this need to understand and love something in every facet that it has to offer. So I drew or painted some rose seeds, and then a growing rose and a rose that is dead, and it kind of reminded me of my best friend Shay, who keeps all of the flowers that have ever been given to her, and that idea of loving something past its use or past when someone else would love it, and remembering it fondly even when you've moved on to the next thing. The next one was actually a timed piece called TikTok, and Professor Franklin Phipps can really probably speak to how absolutely terrible I am at time management, and how I always have either put off starting things or gotten so deeply invested in things that I can't quite finish them. And I kind of realized that painting is one of those things, at least if you're working in acrylic, that does not put a timer on me. And again, that internal need for artists to spend as much time as they feel they need to finish something, and this idea of great master painters having paintings that are never quite finished. So I was just thinking about the relation between ticking and the ticking of a clock, and how time is truly just a construct to me, and how maybe in the long run that does make me and other people with my neurotype more suited to long-term work in art. Then I have It's a Metaphor. Moving into kind of the social connections aspect of my work, I was thinking a lot about how in my early childhood I would try to express these physical sensations or emotional sensations that I had to people who were neurotypical or people who just didn't understand the vocabulary that I had just taught myself in an effort to explain myself. So I would use metaphors. And these are a couple examples of the metaphors I'm currently using. I can't organize the bees in my brain, and I don't have enough spoons to complete this task. And it's kind of this, art has been this way of allowing me to illustrate for people what I'm feeling in a way that is maybe more accessible and builds community with people who may not understand the physical or emotional sensations that I or other people like me have. Then I have inspiration porn, kind of inspired by these like neoclassical statues of women who would inspire men to go to war and be honorable and have glory, and it reminds me of this concept of inspiration porn that essentially takes the stories of disabled people and perverts them or glorifies them or tokenizes them so much that it's not authentic anymore, and they're no longer human, and they're kind of just this allegory for working hard and achieving things despite difficulties. And I think that at some point in my effort to, have this It's a Metaphor moment and explain to people my experiences, I became tokenized, even unintentionally, by the adults in my life who were aiming to be supportive. So that was just a reflection on how art is an essential tool, but the audience is sometimes uncontrollable. And then I have Beacons for Those Painted Blue, which is inspired by my beloved colleague Ash, who self-identifies as having ADHD and autism. She's currently working on a self-portrait that is monochromatic in blue, and she's titling it, Would You Understand That I Had Autism If I Painted Myself Blue, in reference to Autism Speaks movements of make everything blue and have autism awareness, and these things that should be supportive but are actually harmful. So art has been a way for me to connect with people like her who make me feel seen, and she has expressed to me that I make her feel seen, and it's a way to build community that probably could not be otherwise created without this avenue of not having to talk and just knowing each other and just being able to show each other that we have this connection and that we share these experiences. And this is my final piece, the piece that I worked on for the absolute longest. It's a distorted portrait of myself when I'm taking and stimming in my most contorted position. It's inspired by both, Rena Lurer's self-portraits of her body as it is naturally in her book, and her fight kind of against this idea of a portrait being perfect, and the acceptance of the disabled body as it is. But then also photographer Diane Arbus, who took these really beautiful portraits of people from the 1970s who I still see myself in, who had these, crooked smiles and personal adornments that were atypical at the time, and thinking about this kind of inseparable community between queer people and artists and disabled people, and how art has been an avenue for me to very literally repaint my image of myself in a way that is not inspiration porn, but is also not overly pretty or inauthentic, and a way for me to reclaim my personal experience in a way that will be healthy moving forward. And after all of this reflection that is very much so all about me, I have applied it in many ways to how I've interacted with my Saturday Arts Lab students, how I plan to interact with the middle schoolers that I'm working with next semester, thinking about how we can give art to children of various neurotypes to be a tool for them to understand themselves both physically and emotionally, and also within the context of a society that may or may not be accepting or understanding of them. That's all I have, if you guys have any questions.
I just want to share that your process is really beautiful. And thank you for sharing with us today. And I think that it spoke to me, like the last thing you said about connecting across, with children across multiple, I don't know the language that, I heard the language that I tried to repeat it a lot, but neurodivergences across it was, I think you have so much going for that.
Thank you.
I appreciate your process and journey with us.
I think we're all just, I think it's hard to ask questions. I mean, I think we're just all moved by your presentation, and there's so much to think about, and so much to consider, and you're just doing really important work. So, does anybody have another? I think we're all a little speechless.
I don't know if it's appropriate for me to ask a question. Can you talk a little bit about the sort of like the autoethnography approach versus like maybe other kinds of things that are traditional approaches to research, and maybe what that facilitated for you? Or
Definitely. I think that my approach to understanding things has always been very self-centered in my kind of automatic tendency to kind of contextualize things within my own experiences. And autoethnography was kind of a means that I learned from you that helped me be more intuitive in a way that is productive and not just emotional. And I apologize for giving such an emotional presentation. It was intended to be a little bit more factual, but having this approach that is within, is spoken from my own voice, that is created by my own hand, and isn't attempting to be something that is more objective or more fact-based, when the truth is it is very much so based on my own experience, very necessarily so because of the lack of research about my specific neurotype. It was just a really incredible opportunity to work within that format and be able to explore the topic very openly through my own perspective, and not veiling it as something that is objective or scientific.
thank you so much for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you. And the students, are going to be very fortunate to have the opportunity to very special experience. So, thank you. We're all going to be thinking about the presentation. It was really remarkable. Thank you. And I know this is hard. So good. So congratulations. Okay, so I think we want to